So this development really took place. This is confirmed in many different writers. Hazlitt speaks in letter C, especially of looking at this in terms of concentrating power in fewer and fewer hands. So as power was transferred from the state governments to the federal, power is becoming more centralized, more in the hands of a few people as it's transferred from Congress within the federal government to the president into fewer hands. And the implication in Hazlitt is this is dangerous, that there was a deliberate attempt, a successful attempt by the founders to decentralize power because they saw government as potentially dangerous and decentralized power as the safest arrangement, whereas we in the last century were in the process of piling power onto the federal government, which the founders, if you take them at their word, would have found potentially dangerous. Remember, there was a great concern that the federal government would become a tyranny in those early days. Letter D is just, it was something I thought was interesting as I was reading an English history book about the Roman Empire, so going back to the early centuries AD. You had a Roman conquest of Britain, and so for several hundred years you had Roman, England or Britain was a Roman colony, and so more and more the Britons became accustomed to just surrendering the powers of government into Roman control. And this author is pointing out that they kind of lost any sense of being self-governing in any way. And so when the Roman Empire collapsed and the Roman government was no longer there, they were just helpless. They were not able to govern themselves. There was no civic responsibility, any citizen participation, no leaders that were native to the land, and so they just became, they were conquered again because they were so helpless. And so just putting there that there's kind of a warning or a reminder that there could be this problem with concentrating so much power in the federal government. If the American people lose that sense of being self-governing, then if the federal government ever collapses, then we're in big trouble. And just, I'll put this thought in your mind to consider. A lot of political scientists question, why is it that the American people are so apathetic nowadays? Why are they not engaged? Why don't we vote, etc.? To me, the answer to that question is very simple. When power is transferred away from the American people, more and more to the federal government, to the federal courts, to the president, which is all really beyond our reach to really influence one way or the other, Americans will stop putting the time and energy into following politics and being engaged in politics. If those, I think to me it's clear, and I just ask you to think about it, if we brought those decisions back to the state and local governments, I think you can bet that Americans would pay more attention. If, for example, just to bring up something controversial, if the question of abortion was brought back to the state governments to decide whether or not abortion would be legal or not in the state, many people, men, women, young, old, would all be very much paying attention to what our state legislature was doing. So if you're concerned about Americans being active and engaged, I think you would have to reverse this so that the federal government was within its limits and more powers of government were closer to us where we can actually affect what's happening, and it would be more worth putting our time